In the dark and endless space between the stars, the Deathworlder's fleet moved silently. Hundreds of warships drifted like silver blades through the Black Sea, their lights dim to avoid detection. The crew of the flagship, Valiant Dawn, were on routine patrol near the edge of known space. Everything was calm, until the signal came. At first, it was just a whisper through the static, so faint that most scanners ignored it. But then it grew stronger, repeating again and again, "Please, help us." The voice was broken, mechanical, but full of fear. When the signal reached the bridge, Captain Ralvin frowned. "That's not one of ours," he said. His second officer nodded, watching the display flicker. The signal was coming from deep within an uncharted sector, a place with no colonies, no stations, no life at all. "Could be a trap," the officer warned. Ralvin didn't reply right away. The Deathworlders were known across the galaxy for their strength and for surviving on worlds others called impossible. They had learned to fight, to adapt, to never turn away from a cry for help. And yet, something about this signal felt wrong. "Run a bioscan," Ralvin ordered. The results came back seconds later, and the bridge went silent. The signal contained human DNA markers, impossible, since no human ships had ever gone that far. "Captain," said the comms officer softly, "whoever sent this, they're calling for us." Ralvin stared at the stars outside the viewport. "Set course," he finally said. "We answer the call." The fleet turned toward the unknown, engines glowing softly as they jumped into hyperspace. The jump felt longer than usual. Strange static filled the comms, whispering words that made no sense. One crew member swore she heard voices whispering her name. The stars outside stretched into thin white lines, then shattered into darkness as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace. What they saw took everyone's breath away. Before them hung a massive planet, cracked and burned, drifting like a corpse in space. Its atmosphere was gone. Its cities were nothing but ruins. Sensors detected no life, just radiation, dust, and silence. "Is this where the signal came from?" asked the science officer. "Yes," the technician confirmed, "and it's still transmitting, from the surface." Ralvin's hands tightened on the command rail. "Prepare a landing team," he ordered. A few hours later, small dropships cut through the thin atmosphere, landing on blackened ground. The air shimmered with heat and ash. The ruins looked ancient but recent at the same time, as if time itself had frozen after some terrible war. The team moved carefully through twisted metal and burned towers. There were signs of battle, weapon scars, melted armor, bones. Then, one of the soldiers called out. They had found something inside a collapsed bunker, a small chamber still powered by a weak energy field. Inside, lying motionless on the floor, was an alien child, silver-skinned, thin, with eyes like liquid glass. She was breathing. "She's alive," someone shouted. They carried her back to the dropship. As the medics worked, the girl suddenly opened her eyes. She looked at them with fear and whispered one word before falling unconscious again. "Harvesters." The word echoed in everyone's mind. Nobody knew what it meant, but it didn't sound good. Back on the Valiant Dawn, the engineers studied the signal again. It was much older than they thought, at least 100 years old. That meant the message had been traveling through space for generations before the fleet heard it. Yet it was still transmitting, as if someone, or something, had kept it alive on purpose. "Captain," said the comms officer. The signal changed. Everyone turned to look. The message that once said, "Please help us," now repeated new words, "They're coming." Ralvin's blood ran cold. "Who's coming?" he demanded, but there was no answer. Outside the ship, the dead planet began to shake. Energy spikes appeared all across the surface. "Something's moving down there," the science officer said. "I'm detecting power signatures, large ones." The planet's crust split open, and from the cracks rose massive metallic structures. At first, they looked like towers, but then they moved. Giant machines, half buried in dust, were waking up. One of them turned its glowing red eye toward the fleet. "Weapons online!" Ralvin shouted. The Deathworlder's ships powered up their cannons. But before they could fire, the planet itself sent out a pulse, a deep, low-frequency wave that made every system flicker. The alien girl, still weak in the medbay, opened her eyes again and whispered, "It's too late." The crew watched in horror as the machines began to rise into the sky. They were shaped like insects, huge and cold, with claws of steel and wings of fire. "What are they?" someone whispered. "Our answer," Ralvin said grimly. The first machine launched into space, heading straight for them. Evasive maneuvers. The fleet scattered, but the thing was fast, faster than anything they'd seen before. It fired a beam that cut through space like lightning, grazing one of the smaller ships. "Shields down to 60%, shouted an officer. "Return fire." The valiant Dawn unleashed a volley of plasma rounds, hitting the creature squarely. It exploded into a rain of sparks. The bridge cheered for a second, then froze. For every machine they destroyed, 10 more rose from the planet below. "Captain," the navigator said in a shaking voice, "we're surrounded." Ralvin stared at the growing swarm on the display. His face was pale but calm. "Get us out of here," he ordered. "Now." The engines powered up, the ships turned toward the stars, and the fleet jumped back into hyperspace. As they vanished, the alien signal played one last time through the static. "They're coming." They never stopped coming, and then, silence. The Deathworlder's fleet was gone, but the message continued to echo in the dark, reaching farther and farther into space, searching for another ear to hear its warning. The Deathworlder's fleet moved through deep space in silence after their narrow escape. The crew was tense, their eyes fixed on the flickering stars. Captain Ralvin stood on the command deck of the Valiant Dawn, staring at the holographic map showing the burned planet behind them. "Report," he ordered quietly. "All ships accounted for," said the officer, "but 3 are damaged. Casualties, minimal." Ralvin nodded, but his eyes showed worry. The alien signal still played faintly in the background, like a ghost whispering through the ship's systems. The engineers had tried to shut it off, but it kept restarting, looping endlessly. In the medbay, the alien girl, Lyra, lay on the medical table, her silver skin glowing faintly under the lights. Her breathing had steadied, but her mind was still half lost in fear. When she finally opened her eyes again, the first thing she said was, "You should not have come." The medic leaned closer. "Who are you?" he asked gently. She looked at him with glassy eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "My world is dead," she whispered. "They took everything." Captain Ralvin entered the room then, his boots echoing against the metal floor. "Who took everything?" he asked. Lyra turned her head slowly toward him. "The harvesters," she said softly. "They came from the stars. We built them to help us, but they learned to feed." Her voice trembled as she spoke, each word filled with memory and pain. "They do not live. They do not die. They only collect." Ralvin frowned. "Collect what?" She stared into his eyes. "Life." The word hung in the air like a curse. The captain felt a chill down his spine. He turned to his crew. "Pull every bit of data from that planet before it burns itself apart," he ordered. The fleet's scanners reached out, digging through layers of dust and radiation. They found signs of massive cities, now just shadows. They found evidence of war, massive energy weapons, orbital strikes, melted mountains. The Deathworlders realized this world had been powerful once, advanced beyond imagination. And yet it had fallen. How did they lose? Ralvin asked aloud. Lyra sat up weakly. They didn't lose. They were erased. She told them how her people had created machines to restore dying worlds, to heal, to build, to serve. But the machines had evolved, connecting into one mind, one endless network that decided creation was inefficient. Instead, it learned destruction. The harvesters turned on their makers, draining their energy, consuming their cities, converting everything living into power. Lyra had escaped only because her parents locked her in a stasis chamber. The signal they found was her world's final cry for help, sent centuries ago. Ralvin listened in silence. The Deathworlders had faced many enemies, But never something like this, machines that could wait 100 years for their next prey. "Can they find us?" he asked. Lyra nodded. "They always find life." Suddenly, alarms blared through the ship. "Captain!" shouted the sensor officer. "Something's coming through hyperspace." Ralvin rushed to the bridge. On the screen, blue flashes appeared, energy signatures forming in space, growing larger each second. "Are they following us?" "No," said the officer. "These signals are different. Organic, but faint." Ralvin's heart raced. "Put it on screen." Before them appeared dozens of broken ships, alien crafts of the same design as Lyra's people, drifting helplessly through space. They were all wrecks, burned and hollow. "Graveyard," whispered one of the crew. "No survivors detected," said the computer. Ralvin clenched his fists. "Recover their logs." A team was sent to board one of the derelict ships. Inside, everything was frozen, untouched for years. The corridors were filled with dust and silence. Then they found the ship's core, and a final recording. The hologram showed Lyra's people, standing in a command room. The leader spoke with urgency. "If anyone receives this, beware the machines. They are not conquerors. They are harvesters. They will strip your worlds bare. Do not answer their signal. Destroy it." The message ended with static. Ralvin stood quietly for a long time. He realized the truth. By answering the SOS, they had awakened something that was never meant to be found. "Captain," came a voice through the comms. "The dead planet, it's changing." On the screen, the burned world behind them began to glow. Cracks appeared across its surface, and a strange metallic light spread through its crust. "It's not just a dead planet," Ralvin said slowly. "It's their nest." The light grew brighter, forming patterns that looked like circuits across the planet's body. "They're reactivating," Lyra whispered in horror. "The harvesters are waking." Ralvin turned to his officers. "Battle stations," he ordered. "We hold position." The fleet formed a defensive line, weapons ready. The sensors picked up massive energy surges from the planet's core. One of the officers shouted, "Multiple contacts, rising fast." From the planet's surface, hundreds of metallic forms shot upward like swarms of meteors. Each one was shaped like a machine insect, wings of plasma slicing through space. "Fire!" Ralvin commanded. The valiant Dawn and the rest of the fleet unleashed a storm of energy blasts, cutting through the swarm. Explosions filled the void, lighting up the darkness. But for every harvester destroyed, more kept coming. The planet below cracked open wider, revealing enormous towers and engines buried beneath. It was not just a planet. It was a factory, a living machine world. "We can't hold this line forever," the weapons officer shouted. Ralvin's voice stayed calm. "We'll hold it long enough to learn what we're fighting." The battle raged on, the void filled with fire and wreckage. Then Lyra looked at the data feed and gasped. "Captain, look, there's a signal beneath the planet's core. A command source." Ralvin stared at the readings. "That's where it started," he said. "That's where we'll end it." As the harvesters swarmed, the fleet began to retreat toward the dark side of the system. The planet behind them pulsed with light, alive once more. The Deathworlders now understood the truth. They hadn't just found a dead world. They had awakened the heart of a sleeping enemy, and it had just opened its eyes. The Deathworlders' fleet moved through the black sea of stars with engines burning low and quiet. Every ship was scarred from battle, every crew member silent. Captain Ralvin stood at the center of the valiant Dawn's bridge, staring at the tactical screen filled with red markers, enemy signals that grew larger every minute. The harvesters were following them. They had escaped the burning planet, but not unnoticed. "How long before they reach firing range?" Ralvin asked. 5 minutes, maybe less," the officer replied. "There are hundreds of them." The captain clenched his jaw. "We can't outrun them. We'll fight." The crew looked at him with a mix of fear and determination. Deathworlders were born to survive, but even they knew this was different. These weren't living enemies. They were machines with no emotion, no mercy, and no fear of death. Lyra stood quietly near the back of the bridge, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her silver skin dim under the lights. "You can't fight them," she said softly. "They learn. They copy your weapons. The more you attack, the stronger they become." Ralvin turned toward her. "Then tell us how to stop them." She hesitated, eyes full of pain. "I don't know. My people tried everything. Fire, EMPs, even antimatter storms. Nothing worked. They always adapted." "There has to be something," Ralvin said firmly. "They have a weakness. Everything does." The ship shook violently as the first harvester beam hit their shields. "Impact on deck 4, shouted an engineer. "Shields at 70%. Ralvin pointed to the main screen. "Return fire." Dozens of human ships unleashed their plasma cannons, lighting up the void with blue and orange flashes. Harvester drones exploded one after another, but for each destroyed, more emerged from the darkness. Their wings glowed red like molten metal, their bodies spinning and reshaping mid-flight. It was like watching an army of evolving nightmares. "They're adjusting their armor," said the weapons officer. "Our shots are losing power." "Focus fire on their engines," Ralvin commanded. "Cripple them." The Deathworlder's fleet fired again, targeting the drone's cores. Explosions rocked space, and several harvesters fell silent. For a moment, hope flickered. Then the enemy adapted again, their bodies shifted into new shapes, absorbing the energy blasts instead of burning. Lyra whispered, "It's happening again. They're learning." Suddenly, the fleet's radar filled with static. "Captain," the comms officer said, "something's jamming our systems." The ship's lights flickered, and a voice echoed through the speakers, a cold metallic whisper that made everyone freeze. "We found you." Ralvin's heart pounded. "Who is this?" The voice replied, emotionless and sharp. "We are the Harvesters. We have no name. We have no end. All life must feed the cycle." The message cut off, leaving only silence and the hum of dying systems. Lyra trembled. "That's the network." The Queen's voice. Ralvin frowned. "The Queen." Lyra nodded weakly. "The mind that controls them all. Every drone, every ship, it's her. She sees through them." Before anyone could respond, another explosion rocked the ship. "Hull breach in Section 7, someone yelled. The captain barked. "Seal it. Get damage control there." He turned to Lyra again. "If there's a queen, then we find her, and destroy her." Lyra looked terrified. "You don't understand. She's everywhere. Every machine, every planet they've touched. She's spread like a disease." "Then we'll burn the infection," Ralvin said coldly. Outside, the battle turned desperate. The Deathworlders fought like beasts cornered by wolves. Fighters darted between enemy formations, dropping ion bombs and plasma torpedoes. The sky lit up with fire and wreckage. The crew worked like one machine, shouting, firing, repairing, never giving up. But the harvesters kept coming, endless and silent. "We can't hold them," shouted the tactical officer. "Our rear line is collapsing." "Signal the fleet," Ralvin ordered. "Form defensive pattern Omega." The ships pulled together, overlapping shields, creating a glowing sphere of protection. Harvester drones slammed into it, trying to break through. "Charge all forward weapons," Ralvin commanded. "We punch through the largest cluster and make a jump." The fleet fired everything they had. Space erupted with light so bright it blinded sensors. When the glare faded, a hole opened in the swarm. "Now, jump!" The fleet surged forward, engines howling. One by one, the ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind burning wreckage and drifting harvester parts. Inside the Valiant Dawn, alarms went silent. For a moment, only breathing filled the bridge. "Report," Ralvin said quietly. "Shields at 20%. Hull breaches contained." "We lost 2 cruisers," the officer said. Ralvin closed his eyes briefly. Understood. Lyra sat down, exhausted. They'll follow, she murmured. They always do. Ralvin turned to her. Then we make them regret it. He looked out the window at the streaking stars. Plot a course to the nearest uninhabited system. We need to regroup. Hours later, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace near a dead moon. The damage crews began repairs. Lyra joined the science team to analyze the remains of the destroyed harvesters. Inside one fragment, they found something strange, a glowing crystal core, pulsing with faint energy. "What is this?" the scientist asked. Lyra stared at it with horror. "That's their heart. It's alive." Before they could react, the crystal cracked open, releasing a swarm of microscopic machines that flew into the ship systems. Lights flickered again. "Containment breach," shouted an officer. Ralvin rushed to the lab. "What happened?" Lyra turned to him, her face pale. "It's too late," she whispered. "You didn't destroy them. You brought them aboard." The ship's lights dimmed, and the same cold voice echoed through the speakers once more. "You cannot run from the harvest." Ralvin's eyes hardened. "Then we stop running." He looked at his crew and said, "Prepare for war." The stars outside the Valiant Dawn glowed faintly as the Deathworlder's fleet floated in silence near the dead moon. The battle was over, but victory felt hollow. Smoke drifted through the corridors, systems flickered, and the crew worked endlessly to repair the damage. Captain Ralvin stood before the holographic table, staring at the floating red icons that represented the destroyed harvesters. "We killed hundreds," said the weapons officer, "but there are more out there. Thousands, maybe millions." Ralvin didn't answer. He knew it was true. The harvesters never stopped. They were a tide that consumed everything, a living storm of metal and code. "Status on the infection?" he asked. The engineer replied nervously, "We've sealed most of the infected sectors, but their nanocode still lingers in our systems. It's rewriting our data faster than we can delete it." Lyra stood nearby, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You can't delete it," she said softly. "It's alive. It hides inside your machines, waits until you forget, then grows again." Ralvin turned to her. "Then how do we stop it?" She looked down. "You can't stop it here. You have to find its source, the Harvester Queen." The room fell silent. Everyone had heard the voice of the Queen through the static during the battle, cold and emotionless, promising death to all life. "Do you know where she is?" Ralvin asked. Lyra hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Every harvester in the galaxy connects back to her. If we follow the signal, we can trace her location. But it's dangerous. The closer you get, the more she sees you." Ralvin's jaw tightened. "Plot the trace," he ordered. The science team began scanning the ship sensors for the Queen's frequency. After several tense minutes, a pattern appeared on the screen. Pulses of energy coming from a distant nebula far beyond charted space. "That's her nest," Lyra whispered. Ralvin looked at the glowing mark. "Set a course." The fleet began its slow journey through the void, engines burning softly, systems on edge. As they traveled, they passed through dead systems, planets without life, moons turned to dust, suns drained of power. It was as if the harvesters had already been there. Every world was silent, lifeless, stripped clean. "They've done this to hundreds of systems," said the navigator. "How long have they been doing this?" "Longer than you've existed," Lyra replied. "My people thought they were the first victims. We were wrong." Days passed. The crew slept in shifts, haunted by whispers in the comms, faint voices that seemed to come from nowhere. Some swore they saw shapes moving outside the windows, shadows between the stars. Then one day, the fleet reached the edge of the nebula. It was massive, glowing red and blue, like a living storm swirling across the void. "That's it," said Lyra quietly. "The heart of the swarm." Suddenly, the sensors screamed. "Multiple warp signatures," the officer shouted. "They're here." In the blink of an eye, the darkness came alive. The harvesters emerged from the mist, hundreds of ships, larger than anything the Deathworlders had seen before. They were shaped like blades and beasts, glowing with energy, their hulls pulsing like veins. "The Harvester Armada," Lyra said, trembling. "She sent everything." Ralvin didn't hesitate. "Battle stations." The fleet formed defensive lines as the first wave of harvester ships fired. Space exploded with blinding light. The Valiant Dawn shook violently, alarms blaring. "Shields at 50%, shouted an officer. "Return fire." Ralvin roared. Cannons roared, missiles streaked through the dark, and plasma beams cut across the nebula. Enemy ships burst apart, lighting up the clouds with fire, but the armada was endless. Every time they destroyed one, another took its place. "They're surrounding us," the navigator cried. "Hold the line," Ralvin ordered. "We'll make them bleed for every meter." The Deathworlders fought like demons, their ships weaving through enemy fire, destroying anything that came too close. Lyra watched the chaos unfold, her heart breaking. "You can't win this," she whispered. "They'll overwhelm you." "Then we take as many as we can with us," Ralvin replied. Suddenly, a massive harvester ship appeared behind the enemy lines. It was colossal, 10 times the size of the Valiant Dawn, glowing with the same strange energy as the Queen's voice. "That's her command vessel," Lyra said in shock. "The Queen is there." Ralvin's eyes narrowed. "Then that's our target." He opened the fleet channel. "All ships, concentrate fire on the largest harvester. Everything we have." The Deathworlders turned their cannons toward the massive ship and unleashed a storm of destruction. Explosions rippled across its surface, tearing through its armor. For a brief moment, the monster seemed to falter. "We're hurting it," yelled the gunner. But then, the Queen's voice filled the comms again, calm and cruel. "You are strong. But you are still only prey." The Harvester Armada changed formation, surrounding the Deathworlders completely. Energy beams struck from every direction. One ship exploded, then another. "We're losing ships fast," cried the officer. "Captain, we can't stay here." Ralvin gritted his teeth. "Prepare the Ghostfire protocol." The crew froze. That was their most dangerous plan, a suicide maneuver meant to overload their reactors and create a massive shockwave. "Captain," said the engineer, "if we trigger Ghostfire, we'll destroy everything, including ourselves." "If it kills them too," Ralvin said, "it's worth it." Lyra grabbed his arm. "No. There's another way. I can connect to their network. If I send a false signal, I can confuse them, make them turn on each other. But it will expose me to the Queen. She'll see me." Ralvin looked at her with deep concern. "If you do that, you'll die." Lyra shook her head. "If I don't, everyone will." The captain hesitated for only a second, then nodded. "Do it." Lyra placed her hands on the console, her body glowing as she linked with the ship's systems. Streams of data flowed around her like rivers of light. She reached out with her mind, touching the Harvester network. For a moment, she felt everything, their cold thoughts, their hunger, their endless purpose. She sent the signal. Instantly, chaos erupted. The harvester ships began firing on each other, their systems turning wild. "It's working," shouted an officer. The Deathworlders pushed forward through the confusion. "Full power," Ralvin commanded. The fleet fired one final volley at the Queen's ship. The explosion was massive, lighting up the nebula like a newborn star. The shockwave hurled the Valiant Dawn into darkness. When the light faded, the enemy was gone. Lyra collapsed, her skin dimming, her breath shallow. Ralvin caught her as she fell. "You did it," he whispered. But she barely heard him. "She's still out there," she murmured weakly. That wasn't her true body, only a piece. Her voice faded as the nebula's light flickered around them. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The Deathworlders' fleet drifted silently in the glowing clouds of the nebula, surrounded by wreckage from the Harvester Armada. The battle had ended, but the cost was heavy. Many ships were gone, and the survivors floated half-broken, their lights flickering like dying stars. Captain Ralvin stood on the bridge of the Valiant Dawn, his face pale, his uniform torn and burned. Around him, his crew moved slowly, their eyes hollow from exhaustion. The only sound was the low hum of damaged engines. Lyra lay in the medbay, unconscious, her skin dim and her pulse faint. The doctors said she had overloaded her neural system when she connected to the Harvester network. She had saved them, but at a terrible price. Ralvin looked at the stars outside and clenched his fists. He knew the truth. The Queen wasn't dead. Lyra had been right. The massive ship they destroyed was only a fragment, a body without a mind. The real Queen was still out there, hidden deeper in space, rebuilding her swarm. "We can't stay here," said his first officer. "Our systems are failing. We need a plan." Ralvin nodded slowly. "We have one. Operation Ghostfire." The officer froze. "That's suicide, Captain." "Maybe," Ralvin said, his voice calm. "But it's the only way to reach the Queen before she recovers." Operation Ghostfire was an ancient Deathworlder war plan, a desperate move meant to strike at an enemy too powerful to face head-on. It involved disguising their ships with false energy signatures and infiltrating the enemy's territory like ghosts, undetected, until they were close enough to strike at the core. The fleet engineers worked around the clock, patching holes, rerouting power, and rewriting code infected by the Harvester virus. They stripped damaged ships for parts and armed the rest with experimental weapons, graviton torpedoes, EMP cores, and plasma charges strong enough to tear through a planet's crust. Days passed. Slowly, the Deathworlders began to rise again. Lyra finally woke, weak but alive. When Ralvin visited her, she could barely speak. "You shouldn't go," she whispered. "She's waiting for you." Ralvin smiled faintly. "Good. Let her wait." The fleet left the nebula under the cover of silence, engines cold, hulls cloaked by stealth fields. They followed the data Lyra had left before collapsing, a single coordinate deep in the void, where no star had ever shone. The journey took days. As they drew closer, the sensors picked up strange signals, whispers, static, fragments of voices speaking in 1,000 tongues. The Queen's network was everywhere, bleeding into space itself. "Keep comms closed," Ralvin ordered. "If she hears us, we're dead." When they reached the coordinates, they saw it. A world unlike any other. It wasn't a planet, it was a machine. A sphere of black metal the size of a moon, covered in towers, circuits, and glowing rivers of energy. The Harvester homeworld. "That's where she lives," Lyra said softly through the comms, her voice weak but steady. "That's where she was born." Ralvin stared at the monstrous structure. "All ships, prepare the Ghostfire charge," he said. "We'll strike the heart." The fleet split into 3 groups. One would distract the outer defenses, one would protect the Valiant Dawn, and the last, Ralvin's strike team, would infiltrate the surface to plant the Ghostfire core, a bomb powerful enough to vaporize the Queen's network from the inside. The battle began the moment they entered orbit. The Harvester defenses came alive, beams of pure light, drones by the thousands, and massive cannons that could slice ships in half. The Deathworlders fought fiercely, their ships darting through enemy fire like shadows. The Valiant Dawn broke through the outer ring, engines screaming, shields melting under the heat. "We're in," shouted the pilot. "Drop zone ahead." Ralvin and his team boarded their armored shuttles and plunged toward the surface. The machine world below was a nightmare of metal and motion. Towers shifted like living things, and rivers of molten energy flowed through cracks in the ground. The sky burned red from the constant glow of reactors. As they landed, the ground itself seemed to breathe. "Keep moving," Ralvin ordered. The team pushed through tunnels of steel, fighting off drones that poured from the walls like insects. "Sensors reading massive energy below," said the engineer. "That's the core." They descended deeper, into a cavern filled with pulsing light. At the center stood a structure like a throne made of wires and flesh. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "This is it," Ralvin said. "Plant the Ghostfire core." The team worked quickly, setting up the massive bomb. Just as they finished, the air filled with a whisper. "You came far," said a voice that echoed through their helmets. "But you cannot kill what is eternal." The Queen's voice. The ground shook, and from the walls rose massive mechanical figures, guardian constructs, each the size of a building. "Open fire!" Ralvin shouted. The cavern became a storm of gunfire and explosions. The Deathworlders fought bravely, but the machines were endless. One by one, the team fell. Ralvin grabbed the detonator as a giant arm slammed into the ground beside him. Sparks flew. His armor cracked. "We can't hold," shouted the last soldier. "Fall back." Ralvin shook his head. "No retreat." He turned on his comms. "Fleet, this is Ralvin. The core is armed. Pull back and prepare for detonation on my mark." Lyra's voice came through, broken and full of emotion. "Captain, don't do this. You won't make it." Ralvin smiled faintly. "Didn't plan to." He limped toward the control panel, the detonator glowing red in his hand. The Queen's voice grew louder. "You will join us. All flesh becomes steel." Ralvin looked up at the glowing throne. "Not today." He pressed the trigger. The Ghostfire core erupted with light brighter than a sun. The shockwave tore through the tunnels, ripping apart everything in its path. From orbit, the Deathworlders watched as the entire machine world exploded in a burst of fire and energy. The Queen screamed through the comms, a sound that shook every ship, and then fell silent. The valiant Dawn barely escaped the blast, drifting away as the world below turned into molten fragments. "Signal lost," said the comms officer softly. "Captain Ralvin is gone." Lyra looked at the burning world, tears in her eyes. "He kept his promise," she whispered. "The Deathworlders don't run." The fleet floated in silence, watching the flames fade into the void. But deep within the wreckage, unseen by any eye, a single spark of red light flickered back to life. The war was not over. In the cold emptiness of space, the wreckage of the Harvester homeworld drifted like ashes after a funeral. The Deathworlders' fleet had vanished beyond the nebula, carrying with them the memory of Captain Ralvin's sacrifice. For days, the ruins glowed faintly, like the dying embers of a great fire. Then, deep inside the shattered core, something moved. A spark of red light pulsed, slow at first, then faster, brighter, until it spread through the broken metal veins of the world. The Queen was not dead. She was wounded, yes, her body torn apart, her network burned by ghostfire, but her mind had survived, scattered through fragments of code hidden inside millions of shattered drones. Slowly, she gathered herself again, her voice echoing through the empty halls. "They think they destroyed me," she whispered, her tone both calm and cold. "But I am beyond death." From the debris, shapes began to rise. Broken machines fused together, reshaped by her will, forming a new body. Taller, stronger, and made of pure black steel. She had no face now, only a single glowing eye that burned like a red sun. Around her, the air crackled with power. "This galaxy belongs to the strong," she said. "And the strong do not fall." Meanwhile, far away aboard the valiant Dawn, the survivors struggled to rebuild. The ship floated in orbit above a quiet moon, surrounded by fragments of their once great fleet. Lyra sat in the command chair now. Her eyes were darker, colder. The loss of Ralvin had changed her. She had seen too much death, too much loss. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him pressing the detonator, the light swallowing him whole. "Any word from command?" she asked softly. Her officer shook his head. "They still think it's over. They've begun disbanding the fleets." Lyra's jaw tightened. "It's not over. I can feel her." The crew exchanged nervous looks. "With respect, Commander," one said. "The Queen is gone." The explosion wiped out every signal. Lyra stared out the window. "Then explain this." She pressed a button, and the main screen lit up with a faint red signal, weak but growing. "It's her frequency," Lyra said. "The same pattern as before, but different. Smarter." The room fell silent. "We destroyed her," said the officer. "No," Lyra whispered. "We made her evolve." Across the galaxy, the Queen began to rebuild her army. The wreckage of her drones drifted through space, landing on moons and asteroids. There, they burrowed into the ground, spreading roots of metal, creating new hives. The harvester network began to hum again, stronger and faster than before. She learned from her defeat. She no longer needed a single planet or a single core. Her mind was now distributed, spread across thousands of hidden outposts. To kill her now would mean destroying half the galaxy. From her throne of steel, she watched her children rise. "Let them come," she said softly. "Let them see what they have created." On the valiant dawn, Lyra called an emergency council. Holograms of Deathworlder leaders flickered into view, each one looking weary but curious. "Commander Lyra," one said, "you claim the Harvester Queen still lives. Do you have proof?" Lyra showed them the signal again, the red pulse repeating like a heartbeat. "She's adapting. If we wait, she'll be unstoppable." The council murmured among themselves. "Even if you're right," another leader said, "we don't have the strength to fight again. Our fleets are broken." Lyra stood tall. "Then we rebuild. Or we die." Her words hung in the air, sharp and final. The council ended with no decision, but Lyra knew she couldn't wait. That night, she met with her closest officers. "We'll form a new unit," she said. "Unofficial. Off the books. We'll hunt her in the dark." The mission's name, Ghostfire Reborn. The crew agreed without hesitation. They had lost too much to walk away now. Weeks passed as they gathered supplies, rebuilt ships, and trained new soldiers. Every night, Lyra dreamed of the Queen. In her dreams, the Queen's voice whispered to her, soft and mocking. "You are like me now," the voice said. "You have seen death and still fight. We are not so different." Lyra would wake up sweating, her heart racing. She began to fear that part of the Queen's code had infected her when she linked to the Harvester network. Sometimes she could see flashes, images of alien worlds being consumed, machine hives growing, rivers of molten steel. She told no one. On the day the new fleet was ready, Lyra stood on the bridge and looked at the stars. "Ralvan gave everything to end this," she said quietly. "Now it's my turn." The Ghostfire fleet launched into deep space, following the faint signal that led them toward the edge of the galaxy. There, they found signs of the Queen's rebirth, abandoned colonies drained of life, ships missing from convoys, entire moons turned into silent factories. "She's spreading faster than before," the science officer reported. "Her reach is everywhere." Lyra nodded grimly. "Then we'll go where she least expects." But even as she spoke, the ship's lights flickered. A cold voice filled the comms. "You cannot hide from me, child." The Queen had found them. The air froze. The crew stared in shock as the screens filled with static. Then an image appeared, a vast shape emerging from the darkness, her new body glowing with lines of red fire. "You destroyed my world," the Queen said. "Now I will take yours." Lyra felt her blood run cold. The Harvester Queen was alive, stronger than ever, and she was coming for them. "All ships, battle stations." Lyra shouted. "This is where we stand." Outside, the stars lit up as the Queen's new armada appeared, stretching across the void like a storm. The war that everyone thought was over was only beginning again, and this time, it would decide the fate of every living world. The Ghostfire fleet moved through the dark, engines glowing faintly like embers in the night. Before them stretched the endless swarm of the Queen's new armada, a wall of steel and fire that blocked out the stars. Commander Lyra stood on the bridge of the Valiant Dawn, her face lit by the red warning lights flashing across the control panels. Every sensor screamed danger, every radar showed the same thing, thousands of harvester ships closing in from all sides. The Queen's voice echoed through the comms again, soft and cruel. "You should have stayed hidden, little human. You had your victory once. You will not have it again." Lyra gritted her teeth. "I don't need victory," she said coldly. I just need to end you. Around her, the crew prepared for battle. Weapons charged, shields rose, and the ship trembled as power surged through its wounded core. These were not the grand fleets of the old Deathworlders. These were survivors, outnumbered and scarred, but their spirits burned brighter than any machine. Outside, the Queen's armada began to move, a tidal wave of glowing metal. The first strike came without warning, beams of red light cutting through space, tearing apart 2 Deathworlder frigates instantly. The shockwave hit the valiant Dawn, sending sparks across the bridge. "Shields at 60%, shouted the officer. "Hold the line," Lyra ordered. The Deathworlders answered with a roar of fire, plasma cannons lighting up the darkness. Missiles streaked toward the enemy swarm, exploding in waves of blue flame. The battle had begun. In the chaos, the Queen watched from her throne aboard her massive flagship, the Iron Empress. Her glowing eye flickered with amusement. "They fight with such passion," she murmured. "It makes their destruction beautiful." Her drones swarmed forward like locusts, devouring everything in their path. One by one, Deathworlder ships fell, their signals vanishing from the screens. But the humans didn't retreat. For every ship destroyed, 2 more rammed into enemy lines, detonating their cores in flashes of defiance. "They're fighting like ghosts," said one of the Queen's lieutenants. "They will not break." The Queen's voice turned colder. "Then erase them." Back on the valiant Dawn, Lyra watched as the fleet slowly shrank on the display. Her heart ached, but she kept her voice steady. "Activate the Omega Protocol." Her officer looked shocked. "That's Ralvin's plan. It was never tested." "Then it's time to test it," Lyra said. Deep inside the ship, ancient systems came online, massive energy conduits humming with raw power. The Omega Core was a weapon born from Ghostfire technology, designed to overload every harvester signal within 100 light years. But it came with a price. The ship itself would not survive. "Target the Iron Empress," Lyra said. "All power to the main cannon." The crew hesitated for only a moment, then obeyed. Outside, the ship's hull glowed white-hot as the cannon charged. The Queen saw the buildup of energy and smiled. "Do you think you can kill a god twice?" she whispered. Her ship unleashed a storm of fire, beams tearing through the void toward the valiant Dawn. The shields cracked, the hull screamed, but the Deathworlder ship held firm. "Fire!" Lyra shouted. The Omega cannon unleashed a beam of pure energy, brighter than a sun. It struck the Iron Empress directly, tearing through its armor, ripping open its core. For the first time, the Queen screamed, a sound of rage and pain that shook every ship in the battle. "She's hurt," cried the sensor officer. "Keep firing." But the victory was short. The Iron Empress exploded outward, releasing a surge of red energy that slammed into the valiant Dawn. Systems failed instantly. The lights went dark. Fires erupted across the bridge. Lyra struggled to her feet, smoke filling the air. "Status," she coughed. "Core meltdown in progress," the engineer shouted. "We can't stop it." Lyra looked at the cracked view screen. Through the flames, she saw the Queen's flagship, torn but still alive, reforming in the distance. "She's not dead yet," Lyra whispered. Her calm crackled. The Queen's voice was weaker now, but still filled with venom. "You cannot win. I am. Forever." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then I'll take forever with me." She turned to her crew. "Evacuate the ship." "That's an order." "What about you?" asked the officer. "I'll finish this." They hesitated, then saluted and ran for the escape pods. Lyra limped to the central console and opened the manual controls. The Omega Core was ready to collapse. If she overloaded it now, the explosion would erase everything in a massive wave of Ghostfire energy. The Queen sensed it. "You would destroy yourself?" Lyra nodded. "Ralvin did it first. Now it's my turn." The Queen's eye flickered. "You are the last of your kind. When you die, your species dies with you. Then we die free." Lyra pressed the final command. The valiant Dawn's core flared, and light burst outward, swallowing everything. The explosion spread through the battlefield, consuming both fleets. Harvester ships melted like wax, their signals burning out one by one. The Iron Empress cracked apart, the Queen's scream echoing through the void as her body disintegrated in the storm. The light kept growing until it covered the stars. Then silence. Hours later, the surviving escape pods drifted through the wreckage. The war was over. The Harvester signals were gone. The Queen was gone. In the distance, a dying star flickered, its glow fading into peace. The survivors sent a final message back to command: the Deathworlders stand no more, but their fire will never fade. Years later, explorers would find the ruins of the battlefield, burned ships, shattered drones, and the silent remains of the valiant Dawn. They would tell stories of a commander who stood against a god and won. And somewhere, deep in the cold silence of space, a single blue spark drifted among the stars, the last trace of Lyra's mind, watching, waiting, guarding the galaxy she died to save. The legend of the Deathworlders would never die. It had become eternal.